Drink it in, man.
Deep left side carry on. Picks on the block. At the 5. At the 2. At the 1 to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
Drink it in, man.
Get up, Stafford throws. It is end zone. Caught! Oh, baby, what a catch! Kenny Galladay, you're a freak! What a catch! Touchdown, Detroit Lions! Cornbread!
I love the Lions! Say it with me! I love the Lions!
Drink it in, man.
Detroit Kool-Aid, what is going on, everybody? We are back, and last weekend I promised you guys a Senior Bowl draft type podcast. Really apologize I didn't get that out. I'm back here this weekend, so probably be dropping on Saturday for you guys. Just gonna give you some info about things I saw at the Senior Bowl, just some quick comments, news, notes types things I took on some of these players that I thought might fit our Detroit Lions. So, gonna run through this for you. Hope this helps kind of summarize. I know all you out there have your takes on players you're looking at and things as we head to draft and free agency, so this should be fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of run it down alphabetical order, but I'm only going to talk about guys that I highlighted that either fit the Lions positionally or guys I thought might be good players for our team, and just give a quick take on it and some of their measurables, things like that. So the first player on the list, Nasir Adderley. This is a safety out of Delaware. Now, Delaware is not a big school. They're rocking that Fugazi, Michigan helmet. But this guy, I mean, he's absolutely vaulted up the board. Like, one of the sites that I go to for rankings and whatnot, I was shocked to see him up in the top 15 overall. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but I think I did see an interview by this guy. I really liked how he came off in the interview. He did have an interception in the game, 5 tackles, so he produces. You know, to me, the Lions are pretty set at safety with T-Walk and Diggs back there. You know, everybody's pretty set that GQ is going to be moving on. So Nasir Adderley is a good player. I don't know that he fits the Lions, but I did want to bring him up here. The next guy I have is Zach Allen. Now, Zach Allen is a defensive end from Boston College. This guy is 6'5", 285. I mean, he's got a great motor. This is one of those edge-type rushers that'll hold the point of attack, but he just never quits on a play. Not the most athletic, not the most freaky by any means, but definitely a guy that has a great motor and would be a guy the Lions could look at after the first round for pass rush, as well as just that gritty type of edge guy. You know, kind of a Zettel, only with more rush, more upside, I believe. So we got a guy named Corey Ballentine. He's a cornerback out of Washburn, Division II. Now, when it comes to the draft and it comes to Senior Bowl, everything, I'm always trying to focus on the SEC guys, the Big Ten guys. You know, these players that have played against the best competition. But there's every year in the draft, you're seeing guys come from these no-name schools that make plays and that are good. So Corey Ballentine is a guy that he's under the radar. I felt he had some struggles in some of the practices, but he also flashed at times. So people were like, kind of watch out for this guy, and then you'd watch a couple practices, and he'd be getting toasted. But then he'd make a couple plays. He's got that good cornerback size, 6 feet, 204. I mean, that's what the Lions look for, 6 feet and above. You know, hopefully having some range and some length. He did have 5 tackles in the football game, so to me this is an under-the-radar late-round type guy to watch. Next player I wanted to discuss, Chris Boyd. This guy's coming out of Texas, same type of thing, cornerback with size, 6 foot, 195. This was a guy I loved in college. I mean, he had great pedigree. When I watched a few Texas games, I felt like he was a big-time kind of NFL prospect, but I feel like he sort of fell down the radar. I mean, nobody has him that highly ranked. It seems like he's been slipping, but this may be a corner with size that you could get later that has bigger upside. So Chris Boyd's a guy to keep an eye on. Tavon Coney is a guy I have here. He's a middle type linebacker, 6'1", 240 out of Notre Dame. I just feel like he has Lions size. He comes from Notre Dame. Obviously they had a great program this year. He had a fumble recovery and 4 tackles in the game. I think this is a third round type linebacker if you want to look that position. Let's say you don't go high with a guy, but you do want to kind of solidify or get some better depth at the linebacker position. He might be a guy you can look at. Michael Dieter, this is a guard with huge size, 6'6", 310 out of Wisconsin. My notes here just say you can't go wrong with a Wisconsin guard. I feel like, all these Wisconsin linemen that are coming out are good players, tough guys, can play in the type of conditions we have in the NFC North. And just depending on what they want to do with TJ, you could either go with a draft pick or a lower level free agent if you want to solidify that guard position, or who knows what they have in mind for Crosby. Crosby was a left tackle in college. They played him at some right tackle. If they move on from Rick Wagner and want to save that money, maybe Crosby plays over there at right tackle. Taylor Decker at left. You kind of see what Taylor Decker gives you. Hopefully he steps up this next year. People want to slide Crosby inside, and he's done it, but I don't know that he's the best there, when it comes to playing inside of the guard position. So Michael Dieter's a guy that could fill that void. Next name I have here is Penny Hart. Penny Hart's a wide receiver, small receiver, 5'8", 180 out of Georgia State. This guy showed up big all week in practice. He opened eyes. He had that juice. He had that zip. He was able to do what everybody talks about, which is get that separation in the receiving game. So he really impressed, kind of got on everybody's radar. Didn't have much production in the game, though. Only 1 catch for 7 yards. So Penny Hart, I think, helped himself. Again, could be a mid to late type receiver the Lions consider. In my opinion, the Lions right now with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, to me, if they keep both those guys, then you're looking for that underneath, smaller, move the chains, separate type receiver. If they were to get rid of a guy like Marvin Jones and make Kenny Golladay their number 1, then I could see you plugging in another guy with size, touchdown ability, big play, all that. But if they stick with what they have now, you got to look at these underneath, smaller type guys that can replace a Golden Tate, but pay him a fraction of what Golden Tate will get on the open market, and live with the production they can give you. So I think that's a integral spot this offseason. I was so positive about them moving on from Golden Tate for what they got for him. It was disconcerting, don't get me wrong, to see the Eagles do so well and that 3rd round pick go from like 10 to 12 to 15-ish to end up at, I think, 24 or 28 there in the 3rd round, which, man, that was tough to watch. But still, that 3rd round resource, hopefully they can do something good with it. And to me, that 3rd receiver, that other playmaker is very important to this team in 2019. So, I would actually look for a better option than a Penny Hart, where it's a guy that's a little bit of a flyer, but we'll see what they do. I got a Michigan boy next on the list, Karan Higdon. Karan Higdon out of Michigan, all of us that are local here in the state have seen him. Every time I saw him, his athleticism, his size, none of that jumped off the page, but I put, just a hard-nosed runner. And I saw like a documentary on him, or I think it was on that series that was on Amazon Prime where they followed around Michigan. They followed this guy. And to me, he was a humble, hard-nosed football player, a guy you want on your team, a guy that doesn't need to be a number 1 running back, a guy that could complement, carry on, still get those hard yards. He can catch the football. And if he gets a crease, as we saw at U of M, he can hit it. He still has go-to-the-house type potential on certain plays. So he didn't do much in the game. 5 carries, only 18 yards. 5'10", 202 pounds is kind of, again, more on that low range maybe is what you'd see for a receiver type. But I like the guy. It depends where you can get him. People were talking 1st, 2nd round. I see Higdon going maybe in that 3rd, 4th type round. If he slips later than that, he's a great value. But I think he's a good complement for Carry-On. For Carry-On, I think you're either looking for a guy like this that is still big and can bang and has some ability, or that smaller running back that can either replace Theo or could be another option both in the pass game and be a little more electric. So I'll talk about some of those guys as we move on here. The next guy on my list, man, this guy got a ton of pub at the Senior Bowl. He was not on my radar. I don't watch much UMass football, but Andy Isabella. I mean, this guy, I was shocked to hear his speed. This guy's talking about running 4.3s or even high 4.2s. I mean, to me, it's probably like a 4.4 type guy. His speed didn't jump off the page to me, but when they showed his highlights and they talked about it so much, I mean, he does have lightning speed, I guess, to me. Again, he looks like a Wes Welker type. He's 5'10", 195, underneath, shifty type receiver. I thought he struggled in the practices. Like, I heard all this hype, and so, let me watch this guy. And then, like, first play in the practice, they were talking about how he's chopping his feet too much. He's being too delayed with his moves off the line. He's getting jammed up. And then when he get the football put right on him, I think I saw 3-4 drops from this guy in practice. I mean, that was disconcerting, but again, this guy shows up huge in the game. 7 catches, 74 yards, a touchdown. He also had a carry for 14 yards. To me, this is a guy the Lions can look at in the 3rd round type. Get a guy that can make plays, isn't going to be a top 2 type receiver, but could be a game changer as far as a guy that has speed, but can also work underneath. He's had crazy college production, which is always a positive. Anytime you can get that, no matter, even though he's playing at UMass, like, you put up the kind of numbers this guy did in college, like, he could be something at the next level. And like I say, he would be a 2nd or 3rd or even a 4th type receiver on a good team. So, I think, again, if he's there in the 3rd round, consider it. 2nd round, I wouldn't love it. I don't think they need to spend that type of resource on a guy like this. And man, if he slips any farther than that and the Lions are picking, definitely consider him for that Golden Tate type replacement with some speed. So Andy Isabella, keep that name on your mind, Lions fans. Jalen Jelks, this is a guy out of Oregon. I'm not a big fan of Oregon players, to be honest. I mean, I think they play in kind of a wacky scheme, both offensive, defensively. Some of their players have come out and been busts. Some of them on the defensive side of the ball. This guy's a defensive end. He's 6'6", 245. That 245 a little bit light, probably for what Matt Pat is looking for, but I know John Gruden had a lot of good things to say. He seemed to like this guy. And to me, Jalen Jelks fits that jack linebacker role, which is kind of like what you see Devon Kennard play. It's kind of that off-ball linebacker that can also come down in the pass game and can get after the quarterback and make plays. I think Jelks could maybe be that role either on the other side or be kind of a backup type piece for a guy like Kennard, kind of see how he does, and also have somebody in case of injury, that type of thing. I don't think that you had to spend a big resource. I mean, I'm looking probably, 4th type round for this guy. I mean, I still got to wait and see how everything shakes out at the combine. I'm throwing out a lot of round projections, but these are just kind of things I'm thinking or seeing right now based on some data that's out there. Okay, so I have another guard here coming up. Chris Lindstrom from Boston College. I mean, offensive guard. I feel like Quinn has spent a lot of resources on the offensive line, and the only way I want to see him do it this year in the draft is after he goes after the high-end playmakers, the defensive impact type guys. I'm talking like 4th, 5th, 6th round if you want to add to this offensive line and add a guy that can either start or can add some depth maybe, but I don't know that you have to address it much. I mean, so I just highlight Chris Lindstrom. He's 6'4", 310, out of Boston College, had some good things to show at the Senior Bowl, but it's definitely not a guy I have really circled on my list as a top guy. The next guy, this is one of my favorite guys. Depending on where you can get him, I mean, I love his size. 6'7", 271 out of Iowa. Anthony Nelson. I mean, I think this guy, I love his size. I love his length as far as his height, but also just the way he gets after the quarterback, his production. And he's a guy that's, not very highly rated when you do or see mock drafts, but then some of the other sites I'm looking at, they have him really highly rated, kind of in like their top 50, 60 players overall. So Anthony Nelson could be that D end that you're getting, after the first round that could really be hopefully impactful. So keep an eye on his name as well. Let's see here. We got a cornerback from Penn State. You're going to have to apologize for this name. Amani Onawarie, I believe is how it's pronounced. That's a tough one. But this guy, again, corner, 6'1", 201. I felt he had good size. I felt like he was decent at the Senior Bowl in the practices. In my opinion, he might have some safety flex. Not that we need it right now, but anytime a guy can play corner and play safety, that's a bonus. So, look out for this guy as an option for the Lions. I think he's been projected in a couple mocks to them, either in the second or third round. I don't love him that much, but I think depending on how the board falls, he could be an option. Now, this next guy really, really, really showed out in the Senior Bowl game. Tony Pollard, running back out of Memphis. Of course, this guy wasn't on my list. Again, not watching much Memphis football. 6 feet, 208. This is a guy that, and we're going to talk about it more as the offseason goes on, but I promise you, I'm sort of on this train of cutting Theo Riddick. Saving that money. He's making about $4-5 million this next year, and plugging in a guy like this, a Tony Pollard. You can get him probably late 5th, 6th type round, depending on how he creeps up the board. But this guy can catch a football. He's got some juice. I mean, look at his stats here in the Senior Bowl: 8 carries, 60 yards, a touchdown, 2 catches for 13. I mean, the Lions need a new electric third down type back. I mean, if they keep Theo Riddick and they use him properly and get him the football and get him on some new routes rather than his same old route that he runs every play, the old outcut, dart to the inside, catch it up the middle, and run for an extra 10. If they can use him and move him around, great. If we've seen the best of Theo Riddick and just that one route, a few run plays here or there, you can't pay a guy like that $4-5 million. So Tony Pollard is a guy that's an option that could get a late draft pick. Again, you got Kerryon, your workhorse. Darrell Bevel, I think, could use a guy like this, move him all over the field, catch the ball, and a guy that could score from almost anywhere on the field. So Tony Pollard, I really liked and thought could be a nice piece for this team. Let's see, move down my list here. This is kind of the North team that I'm working my way through. Got a couple more names. Dexter Williams, I wouldn't call him a bigger type running back, but he seemed bigger when I saw him in games. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's from Notre Dame. He seemed like a physical runner, seemed like he has decent size for the position. I thought this was a guy, again, like Higdon, that I don't know how much he can catch the football, but he's just that 1-2 to Kerryon. Kerryon being the 1A, this guy being kind of like a similar skill set, but not being as talented, that could come in for injury. So Dexter Williams, just another running back option I had highlighted here. Caleb Wilson, this is the tight end out of UCLA. Now, this wasn't a guy that I liked to start with, and then as I kind of looked into him, I like his size, 6'4", 235 pounds, 235, a little bit lighter than you see some of these tight ends. But that's because he's a flex guy. He's a guy that you put out on the outside. You let him move around, you let him catch the football, and then you bring in some of these blockers or some of these bigger guys that we already have or can go get for cheap. But Caleb Wilson, he had great college production. He was a guy that, no matter what, seemed like one of the best pass catching tight ends in the draft. And I think that's what the Lions need. So depending on where you can get this guy in the draft, will let you load up in the beginning and maybe get him in the middle to late rounds. I think it's something to consider. UCLA products, not always the toughest football players or the best guys, but I think he could be something to consider. He had 4 grabs for 24 yards in the game, so, not many yards per catch, but they were looking to him. He did seem to catch the football. So let me move on to the South squad. We'll work our way through here. South team, I did highlight Will Greer here on my list. I know he got hated on a little bit throughout the process of just a guy, I don't know about his arm, I don't know about his accuracy. To me, I put here, I liked his swag. I thought he was a guy that, connected with Deebo Samuel and a few guys right off the get-go. Really seemed to be a guy that, go out, play quarterback, not overthink it, not be too mechanical. But we saw what he did in college, man. He could throw it all around the yard, put up crazy stats. And he's just a later end type quarterback that you might want to consider. I mean, he doesn't have great size, he doesn't have great measurables, but like I say, swag and can throw it around and make plays. I mean, that's something you got to always consider, no doubt about it. Now, the opposite of him at the quarterback position, the next guy on my list who I highlighted was Tyree Jackson. I mean, this is a guy 6'7", 245 pounds at the quarterback position. I mean, you don't see that too often. This guy got a lot of pub early on. He got added late, I think, to the Senior Bowl, and people were like, hey, look at this guy. He's just a specimen in the jersey, but can he actually play? Can he throw the football accurately? Can he, run an NFL offense? Hey, I thought this guy, if you can get him late in the draft, it might be worth, consideration. Now, let me pause on that because with the Lions having Matt Stafford at only 31, 32 years old, they've already paid him. Jake Rudock's still there. I don't see any team coming to grab him. And then depending on if you boot Matt Castle, you bring in some other quarterback. I mean, a veteran or something like that. I'm more of a proponent of not wasting a draft pick on a quarterback. Now I know people will say it's an investment. You take a quarterback in almost every other draft. That way you either have somebody in the pipeline or they become a tradable asset. I don't really agree with that. I feel like that taking a quarterback is sort of a wasted pick, especially in those early to mid type rounds. Late in the draft when it's a total coin flip, I don't mind it, but I still don't love it because I think you could coin flip on an offensive lineman, corner, an electric receiver late in the draft and hope they pan out more so than a guy that the only time they will play is the worst case scenario when your starter is down. And I know everybody is down on Matt Stafford to some degree, but you don't want to draft a guy in the mid rounds hoping that he's going to replace your guy who you've already paid and hope that he bounces back. So, I lean against these quarterbacks, but I did just want to bring up Tyree Jackson and Will Greer's guys that, man, they have crazy, crazy size. In Tyree Jackson's case, Will Greer can throw it and has some of that just star type potential when you see him play and when you hear him on the mic. So those are two guys to consider, but I'd say don't draft a quarterback unless it's really late, unless you really love the guy. So next guy on my list, Gary Jennings Jr. I don't know. I didn't look into if this guy is related to Greg Jennings. Part of me thinks he might be, I don't know if it's son. I should have looked that up before I did the podcast, but when I watched him, man, this guy, he's coming from that West Virginia, so it's like, man, can that translate? They always run that kind of crazy up-tempo, just slinging around the yard offense, but when I saw him, I was kind of like, man, this guy looks like an NFL-type receiver, not a 1 or a 2, but a 3-4 type of receiver that can make plays. I mean, he seemed to have that same swag that Will Greer did. He caught the football for the most part, from what I could see. And can he be an NFL-type receiver, though? He's 6'1", 210, which is, again, for that smaller, shiftier type receiver. He had 2 catches for 64 yards and a touch in the game. That jumped off the page. Again, depending on where this guy falls, I think he could be a consideration for the Lions. Next player I have is a cornerback. I have lots of corners on this list because I think this is a key position for the Lions. People are talking Greedy Williams up top. Again, I don't mind it. I think they really need to address that position opposite of Slay. But, some of these later guys you got to put on your radar because if we pass on corner in the beginning, when and where can we get a corner that can also be productive without spending a high resource is important. So Isaiah Johnson, this guy's a monster, 6'4", 203 pounds out of Houston. Crazy big size. You can't coach size, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I feel like he was a higher projected guy, and they had some good corners come out of Houston in the last handful of years. Isaiah Johnson, just due to his size alone and ability, is somebody that's at least on my radar. I got a defensive end up next out of Georgia, Jonathan Ledbetter. 6'4", 280 pounds. That seems to be right in the range of what the Lions look for. Those heavy ends that also have some height and some size. 6'4", sometimes, the bigger guys are 6'6" or so out there at edge. 6'4" to me, as long as you can get after the quarterback, is still plenty tall enough and plenty heavy enough at 280. I think this guy has burst. Obviously, he's an SEC guy. He played at Georgia. He wasn't one of their top type playmakers, but I feel like he's a guy you can get later in the draft that went to a big school and has ability, and I like him. Another quarterback. I just gave my diatribe on maybe not drafting a quarterback or not valuing him, but this is another guy that, he had that swag. He had that Baker Mayfield type personality, and just also wasn't afraid to throw it all over the field at the Senior Bowl. So, Gardner Minshew. What this guy was up for the Heisman, which is kind of crazy because he went to Washington State. I think he only had 1 or 2 years of production. Just kind of be able to go to New York, I think that was a little much for the guy. But he did have some crazy numbers in that offense, and obviously, like I say, just watching him in the practices, I felt like he had a ability to kind of galvanize his teammates and get out there, and just had a great attitude through everything. Can he play at the next level and back up that mojo that he brings? That would be the main thing. Or he's probably more of a backup type guy in the league, but the Lions do need a backup or a pipeline type guy. Maybe this guy has more upside than Jake Rudock, but he really didn't do anything in the game. Played in the second quarter, 1 for 8 for only 4 yards. To me that's just more of a product of the Senior Bowl, just being weird how they only get to play a little bit and in and out, and depending on what they're not used to receivers, that type of thing. But that's definitely a guy just to keep your eye on late in the draft if he's there. If you like him better than Rudock and think he could bring something, maybe bring him in. But gotta be careful about that because, like I say, we need players at defense, offense, everywhere. Don't want to plan for our quarterback either getting hurt or not being there, and that's kind of what you do when you make those type of selections. Got a few more names here to get through, and then I'm also going to give you guys some quick couple draft simulations that I do via website where it's able to work through and tell you kind of what my picks have been when I ran some 7-round mocks. So let me get through the last few of these players, and then we'll move on to a couple draft sims before we get out of here. Jimmy Moreland, another cornerback. This is a guy out of James Madison, another small school. He got some pub early in the week. I know Jeff Risdon and people have said, keep your eye on this guy. I thought he showed out at times. Could be a sneaky late type cornerback option. If the Lions think that he has what they look for and thinks that he could play, I don't mind it. I think it's another shot sort of in the dark of can you take him later in the rounds, and can he actually either start or play in the slot or make plays for you? I don't know about that, but we'll see. Just again, the more corner options we have, the better. I got another big beast coming up here, offensive guard Ben Powers out of Oklahoma. I thought this guy was just a big, powerful guy with some nasty. Oklahoma always kind of the last few years has run that kind of spread type scheme, but I know they had a great offensive line keeping Kyler Murray clean. Will that translate to the next level is the big question. There have been some guards and some offensive linemen out of Oklahoma that have busted out of the league, but 6'4", 313, kind of that stocky, big offensive guard that you look for. I want to say he played on the left side, which I'm not a big fan of. Drafting a guy that's always played on the left side at left guard and moving him over to right, I don't think that really works out too many times very well. But if he's played both and moved around, that could work out better. But the Lions definitely need a right guard if they move on from T.J. Lang and don't think that Crosby can fit there. So Ben Powers, again, another late name to keep an eye on. Next guy I have, this guy, when he walks into the measurable room, when they measure height, weight, speed, all that stuff, he fails on all those measurables. 5'10", 180 pounds, looks terribly unathletic, but he's a wide receiver out of Clemson. Hunter Renfrow, what did Dabo Sweeney say it's always third and Renfro. I mean, that's what the Lions need, man. They need a chain mover. They need a down and dirty guy that can make plays and that can move chains and score touchdowns and has no flash, no nothing. You get a guy like Hunter Renfro. This is what I always argue with Grifka about. Like, let's say you get Hunter Renfro in the 6th round. He has none of the measurables the NFL look for, but he has college production. He always has been able to catch the football and do what he needs to do. And let's say you get him in the 6th round. So like Golden Tate, let's say like out on the open market, he gets like 10, 12, 13 million bucks a year on like a 2 or 3 year deal. Hunter Renfro in that 6th round is getting maybe, 400, 500,000 bucks, even maybe less than that over like a 4 or 5 year contract. That's also not guaranteed. Like, to me, that's just a crazy savings and just a great shot in the dark of filling that spot. Is he Golden Tate? Is he some of these other shifty receivers? No. But, I mean, can he do what the Lions need while Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones and maybe you get a high-end tight end that can make plays? Can he do some of that other work the Lions need at a crazy low price? Absolutely. So, Hunter Renfro could go undrafted, could go really late, but is a guy, if the Lions want to hold their water on a 3rd, 4th type receiver that can be better than TJ Jones, can be better than Andy Jones, can be better than some of the options we've had, I think Hunter Renfro has some of that grittiness and upside. Couple more names here, everybody. Deebo Samuel. I mean, this guy was the talk of the Senior Bowl. Best player all week. Going deep, making plays, catching the football. Was great in the interviews. Just seemed to be really helped his stock. I know there's been some analysts I've listened to that love Deebo. They've always been pubbing him and repping him. And then there's been people that have just kind of been like, he's good, but he didn't live up to what he could have in college, that type of stuff. I mean, he only had 1 catch for 15 in the actual game. I think that came right off the bat, either with Will Greer or somebody slung him the football, caught it, and then you just didn't see or hear much from the guy the rest of the game. I mean, this is a good player. It's just, where do you get him? Is he worth a high 2nd round price if he's sitting there and the Lions want to really invest that in a receiver if he's the best on the board? Possibly. I mean, I just don't know if I'd go that route, depending on what they did in the 1st round. Those first 2 rounds, I'd love to get high-end star-type potential. I don't know. Deebo seems to have that, but also, again, he's only 6 feet, 210. I don't know. 2nd round, I consider it. If he slipped farther than that, I think his chance, is better that I would invest in him. But a high 2nd round is a high price to pay. So, 2 names left. Montez Sweat. Everybody talked about him the first couple of days, that he had some crazy snap in his hands, and he ended up bull rushing that guy, knocking him to the ground. I mean, I thought he did well in the one-on-ones. His size is 6'6", 245. To me, the 245, where do you play him? I mean, is he a rush end, or can he even play, the Lions-type linebacker at only 245? I don't think so. He'd have to be a rush guy, and just depending on if they like that size or if that's too light for them. And I saw an interview with him. I mean, he seemed like a good kid. The analysts seemed to like him. To me, I just kind of looked at him and said, man, I don't see a crazy, twitchy, freaky athlete or a guy that's a star. I feel like he can be a good NFL player, but I don't know that you'll be talking about Montez Sweat the next few years as like a top-end rush in the league, and where he's going to go, either in that mid to late 1st round or early 2nd type round. I didn't think I wanted him, on my football team. But, like I say, we got to go through some more testing and see, but he just seemed like a good player, not a great or a star, which is what I'm looking for. Last guy I had highlighted here on my list, this was a crazy, every time I'd see this name on some of my draft sims before the Senior Bowl, I was kind of like, man, who's this guy? Like, just a crazy name, Rock Ya-Sin. Rock Ya-Sin out of Temple. Now, the name is crazy, but his game is crazy. When I watched him at the Senior Bowl, this guy's 6'2", 190, so really good height, pretty good weight there for a corner. And this guy, he was a dog, man. He wanted to have the top guy. He was trying to guard Deebo all week. Yeah, he got burned a few times, but he also made a few great plays. I thought he lived up to some of the potential where people were saying, watch out for this guy. The more I looked up on him, I mean, he's going to be in that 2nd, 3rd type round. if the Lions pass on corner early, can you get Rocky Sin and preferably in the third round? But if second round, depending on where the corners sit and where could you get a rush end in a corner in rounds 1 and 2 if you can? And Rocky Sin is the best option in the second round. Hey man, I liked how he played. I thought he was good there. Just as far as like an overall player. So he's one of my favorites. Just that ability to compete, that ability to want to be good out there on the edge, and I think he could fit here with Detroit as well as be a corner you get without having to spend that first round resource on him. So something to consider. So I'm sure there's plenty of names here on the list that I either skipped by or I missed that you guys like out there, but those are just some main names that I picked up on that I wanted to consider. I thought it was a good Senior Bowl. Again, people are calling this draft light. I don't think it's light. I think it's a good draft, top to bottom. I think you're going to be able to get good players those top 2 to 3 rounds. And then you're also going to find gems later, no doubt about it. So really important draft for the Lions. Now, before we close up this podcast on the Senior Bowl, I also want to put some draft stuff in here. So again, there's a website I use where I'm doing 7-round draft sims. Now, there's an algorithm and the way the computer sort of makes all the picks for all the other teams, and I make the Lions picks. So, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But do I just go ahead and pick the type of players when they're on the board that I think might fit the Lions? Yes, and it gives you some type of idea who might be there, who the Lions could be considering. So, I'm just going to give you a couple of these sims. I'll give you 3 of them real quick, and then talk them through a little bit and then get out of here. So the first sim, this was a little bit different. So at pick 8, I went a little bit different. I want to see how the draft would shake out. I took Devin White out of LSU. Man, I watched this guy. I know we already have Jared Davis, but Devin White is an absolute beast. He's a guy that you could play in the middle with Jared Davis, or could even put him in the middle and move Jared Davis maybe to the outside, make him the captain of your defense. Absolute stud. Second round came around, I took A.J. Brown out of Ole Miss. Every time I saw this guy on TV, I thought he looked like an absolute NFL stud. Just his build, his bulk. He's played in the slot. He can play outside. I know he has some, measurable issues, or as far as his athleticism isn't as high as some of the other receivers in this draft, but he looked like he could play and get first downs, score touchdowns. Third round, I was able to get Charles Omenihu out of Texas. I think he was at the Senior Bowl. I didn't talk about him, but this is a rush end that could go much higher than that. But if he's there in the third round, I snagged him up. Thought he had great size, length, ability to get after the quarterback. In this draft sim, I was able to get Anthony Nelson in the 4th. I don't think he'll be there at that point, but hey, he was on the board there. I took him. Another crazy one here, Karan Higdon in the 5th. Again, he's being talked about as a 2-3 or higher even type of guy. I mean, yeah, if he's there in the 5th, I'm taking Karan Higdon, no doubt about it. I was able to get my tight end in the 6th round. I took Tommy Sweeney. Again, not very athletic, but had good size. Did decent at the Senior Bowl. It just felt like I'd plug a tight end in at that point. A young guy that maybe has a little bit of upside and can do some things. 6th round, I love this pick if he's there late. I mean, I think this is a guy the Lions should definitely look at. Justin Lane out of Michigan State. I loved what he did in college. Depending on how he does the combine, will he be in those top or middle rounds, or will he fall late? If he falls late, keep him on your radar. In this draft sim, I was able to get Tony Pollard out of Memphis in the 7th. Questionable again if he'd be there that late. But catch the football, third down type back, add to the backfield. And then with my last pick in the 7th round, I was able to get Four Holt out of Arkansas. Big old nasty guard, which had a really high rating. At a couple of the sites I looked at, I couldn't believe he's still there in the 7th. So take him there and then be able to solidify that position depending, or give them some flexibility depending on what they do. All right, next draft sim I had was... I took Greedy with my first pick at number 8. In the 2nd round, I was able to come back and get one of my favorite players in the draft. Most people are talking about this guy mid-first round, but he was there in the 2nd. I'm not going to pass on him. Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown out of Oklahoma. Man, this guy can take the top off the defense. He can score touchdowns. He can make plays. He's tiny. Will he last the NFL? I don't know, but in 2019, moving forward in the new NFL, yeah, I think he can last and be a huge impact player. 3rd pick, I was able to get Chase Winovich out of Michigan. Crazy motor, gives you that gritty defensive end. I'm curious, really curious to see if Chase Winovich lasts, or not lasts, if he is able to do at the next level what he did in college, because he didn't even look like he should have produced in college, but every game he turned on the tape, he was getting after the quarterback, he was talking smack, he was making plays, and if he can do even 2/3 of that in the league, I think he's a good draft pick there in the late third round. Fourth round, I was able to get Joe Johnson, another edge rusher out of Miami, Florida, the U. Like his ability and upside. Fifth round, on top of the fifth round, again, I'm trying to find corners, so I already took greedy, but I went and got Lavert Hill out of Michigan. Again, really highly touted, didn't have the greatest college production all the time, but man, just, to me at that point, just another corner that could possibly play and is probably definitely better than some of the current options we had. Hey, I'll take him. Sixth round, I was able to get Gary Jennings. Again, still not really sure where he'll fall. He was on the board. I felt like I'd add to my receiver core at that point. So I got Hollywood Brown and Gary Jennings in this draft. Again, the sixth round, I was able to add Tommy Sweeney again. So I didn't take a tight end high. So you're looking for guys later. Again, he was best available at that point. Ended up taking him. Seventh round, pick number 10, I was able to get Michael Pinckney, a linebacker out of the U. And then in the seventh round, he's still on the board. Again, not totally sure where he'll go. Dexter Williams added to my running back late there in the seventh round. I already talked about him in the Senior Bowl. So again, a compliment to carry on at that point. Just another body to grind out in the run game. Third and final draft sim for all you guys out there. Hopefully, I know I've just kind of been rumbling through this stuff, but hopefully this is giving you some good draft content as well as Senior Bowl and whatnot. So my final draft sim that I did just a few days ago, I was able to get Greedy Williams at number 8. In the second round, I was able to get TJ Hawkinson. This is a guy that people have put really high in the first round. I put in the middle to late first round. If he slips to that pick 2 and the Lions are on the clock, I think he's a guy to consider. He can block, he can catch. He seems like an absolute just football player type guy that you want to have on your team. He's young. I think he'd be an interesting option for them if they want to invest heavily in the tight end. And it's crazy, in the third round with pick 24, this guy was the best on the board. I loved his measurables, and he was really high ranked on some sites I looked at. I ended up double dipping on tight ends. I took Caden Smith out of Stanford. Stanford's put out some good tight ends. He's the top guy. And he just seemed to be the best available. So this would be a scenario where the Lions would be taking 2 tight ends in the second and third round, really upgrading that position after they got their corner. But now what are you going to do on the defense and at the other positions to sort of supplement that? So again, as the board falls is sort of how I draft. So in the fourth round, instead of going defensive end or some of these other defensive positions I didn't love, I took the big old monster, Hakeem Butler out of Iowa State. This guy is... His height weight was crazy. It was like 6'6", 200, and what was he, like 235 pounds or something like that? I mean, just an absolute mountain of a guy. So like if I can get a guy like that, and if he can really make plays and be good, that's when I'd maybe move on from a guy like Marvin Jones, and put him and Kenny together would just be absolute crazy size and ability out on the outside, and then get somebody underneath that can make plays, which we already did, our 2 tight ends in this scenario. Fifth round, I was able to get Michael Jackson out of Miami. This is a guy that he's a good corner, ranked highly. Getting him in the fifth round I thought was good value. Sixth round, I was able to get TJ Edwards, kind of just a big linebacker out of the Big Ten. You usually can't go wrong there, adding to our linebacker core. Later in the sixth round, this is crazy value. I don't think this guy will be there, but since he was, I snagged him up. Again, want to add to my receiving core, but I already got my monster, so here I take my underneath to kind of move the chains. Just shifty guy. I was able to get Terry Godwin out of Georgia, one of my favorite players in this year's draft, especially based on where you can get him. I think his value is going to be crazy good in the next level. Round 7, pick 10, I took a flyer on Wyatt Ray, sorry, I had those reversed. He's an edge out of Boston College. Again, just kind of when I'm at that point in the draft, I'm trying to see, okay, where's this guy ranked versus like where I'm at in the draft. And man, a couple boards I saw he was way up there and was pretty highly ranked and had decent size. So I took Wyatt Ray out of Boston College. They've been a pretty good defense over the last couple of years, and thought that was worth the risk at that point. And my last pick, 7th round, pick 20 in that round. I just took a flyer. Gardner Minshew, the quarterback, thought it was worth it at that point. And again, that's kind of how I would take my quarterbacks, is wait till the very end. If nothing else is looking at you, staring you in the face, hey, he was worth the roll of the dice at that point. So everybody, we've talked about the Senior Bowl. I've given you some draft sims. I cannot wait till we get farther in this process, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Detroit Kool-Aid Cast coming at you. It was super fun to kind of run this down. I just ran it through solo as best I could. Hopefully you guys enjoy this, and please get at us with reaction, questions, any of the stuff you want us to hit up on the Kool-Aid Cast in the next few weeks as we both finish our rewinds. We're going back and looking at games for 2018, but as we fast forward into the free agency and draft process, which is right around the corner. So thank you, everybody. Detroit Kool-Aid Cast, we're out.
Pack the bag, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions.
Drink it in, man.